Welcome to our Microsoft 365 Copilot for Professional Services webinar. We're really honored to bring a big panel of people to discuss the hot topic of Copilot and AI and how do you integrate that into your business? How do you use it? What are the first steps that we're going to take to really start an engagement and start adopting this inside of professional services? Today, we're going to have myself, I'm Andrew Brower, client partner with Valorem Azure. We're mainly focused in the Azure SI space, so app innovation, custom apps, data and AI, security. We'll also have Naeem, Annie, Bill, and a customer presentation from Scott Keenan. Each one of these will introduce themselves when they get to their section. But just a little more about myself. I've been with Valorem Reply for about a decade, started out as an engineer, and then moving into our client partner customer success area. So taking that development passion for building things and really starting to move into how do I work with clients to help them envision what they want to do long-term strategically. Today, we are going to discuss in the agenda the role of AI. We'll get into probably the most burning question amongst most people is the security and privacy and protection while using AI and copilots. Then we'll transition into strategies for driving that copilot adoption. Once you've adopted it, now how do we get it to customize inside of your business's organization, and how do we use that? Bill will talk a little more on that, and then we'll go back to our guest speaker, and then we'll finish it out with some Q&A and closing remarks. So throughout the presentation, make sure you're jotting down your questions and notes as we go through the slides, add them to that Q&A panel. I'll monitor that as we go, and then when we get to the end, we'll start addressing those questions. All right, so who is Valorem Reply? So Reply is a decentralized organization based out of Europe. Valorem is a part of that network in the US, and we cover primarily our Microsoft partnerships. So as you see here, we cover every avenue that Microsoft provides as a go-to-market. From app innovation, infrastructure, data and AI, security, modern work, and business applications, so your low-code, no-code. And we cover that wide gamut. Now, being a decentralized company, Valorem is typically the name dealing with our Microsoft relationship. So in this call, we have two Reply companies, MW Reply or MW Valorem, and Valorem Azure. Representing the app innovation, infrastructure, data, and AI, as well as the modern work component. Some of our clients that we've worked with in the professional services area include any gamut of what I just covered in that last slide. We've done some infrastructure migrations from dark to cloud. We've done a lot of modern work, adoption and change management, bringing companies into copilots, building custom copilots, as well as low-code, no-code, Power App type applications. So what's the role of AI in Microsoft 365 Copilot? So first and foremost, there's three key areas that right out the gate that Microsoft Copilot really helps companies. One is the broken meeting. We've all been in numerous meetings or at the same time, multiple meetings where you have to be multiple places at once, or, hey, I'm trying to be a attentive listener to whoever's presenting, but I'm also wanting to take notes. So how do I make sure that I'm taking good notes? So Copilot has really excelled in that in Teams and be able to, as we're doing right now, recording and transcribing these notes so you can then reference back and get a great summary with action items and everything that you would typically try to achieve, but you can still be very attentive inside of the meeting, right? The other one is the information labyrinth, as you see there. In today's day and age, we've got tons of documents everywhere. Sprawl is a big thing. So using a AI Copilot to be able to natively talk to a chat to bring up and have it go do the heavy lifting of going and finding relevant context behind what you're trying to find, or find documents, or find that email that's buried 1,000 deep in your email that you got to last week. And lastly, we all struggle with trying to think of the creative thing, and really coming from the dev side of things. It's interesting because we have the notion of pair programming. And this is what I like to think about a lot of this as is, hey, I have this Copilot that I can bounce a couple ideas off of, and it can help me draft an initial idea or initial email, or just kind of help get my ideas out into some notes for a meeting. So these three key areas are, hey, I don't have to do anything inside of Copilot, and really start using the tool to help me get into that. Mileage will vary, and the tough part with Copilot is the Copilot name has kind of been synonymous, as I think of it, as like we Google everything, whether or not you're using Bing or a different search engine. If I'm going to research, I'm going to go Google it, right? Copilot, there are multiple flavors of Copilot, and everything is a Copilot. So you kind of get lost in this web of, well, what do I actually have? So in this slide, we wanted to kind of lay out and really make it clear on, hey, what Copilot do I have, and what do I need to get in order to accomplish some of these things that we'll be showing today. So the Copilot, if you bring up Bing and you use Copilot in there, you get the use of that large language model, web search, pretty basic, free, out of the box. Then you'll get into Copilot Chat, which you're getting more into that enterprise, so you get more into those security details, that data protection. And then if I really want to drive in and start using my M365 ecosystem and apps within there, I need that M365 Copilot. So then I can start referencing emails or PowerPoint presentations, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, if you get into Copilot for sales, you got additional add-ons. So now if I'm in Dynamics 365, I can chat with my pipeline and potential opportunities inside of there as well. And we'll get more into these in the future speakers as they dive into this. But I just wanted to lay out the Copilot web inside of here and get it a little more clear. So what's the benefits of a Copilot investment? And hopefully we will be able to prove that through the rest of the presentations. But as it boils down, it is efficiency, right? We are all wearing multiple hats throughout the day. That's just the part of the industry these days. So being able to have something that I can quickly reference, and I have to do less research and have something else go and find that, I'm gaining efficiency in my day. And through that, I'm building in a work-life balance, or an enjoyment of what I'm doing, and I'm not being drugged down in that, right? And so I'll have a work output improvement as well. But doing all of that, I need to make sure that I'm protected, and what I'm researching, I'm not going to be surfacing in critical data or data that I should not be seeing, et cetera, et cetera. But being able to do all that with knowing that I'm protected, and inside of our Microsoft Copilot ecosystem, those are all built in and ready to execute without having to really worry about that. And finally, just kind of some numbers that we've seen over at the end of 2024. So a 4% increase in top line revenues. So again, talking to what I was just saying, is people being able to be more efficient at their jobs. I'm not spending so much time doing the mundane, I have to go find the thing, other than using my expertise that you did hire me for, right? A 0.7% decrease in operational expenditures, a 30% reduction in new hire onboarding time. We've used this inside of our organization tremendously to help people onboard, and now they can communicate through Copilot to find out these documents and ask questions and reference big HR manuals, et cetera, on their own. So we've firsthand seen this in our implementation. And then just the unquantifiable benefits. So that better work-life balance, as I mentioned earlier, is if I'm not having to do the things that I don't like in that searching for emails or trying to find this, or I have to take meeting notes and I can't concentrate on what the content is in the meeting, that all brings me down consistently. And the more and more meetings, that's going to happen. So having that Copilot, that buddy beside you to be able to work through that, helps your work-life balance, your morale throughout the day. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Naeem to talk about risk and the threat landscape around the security of Copilot.
Alrighty then. Thank you very much, Andrew. My name is Naeem Mohammed. I work with our security team, and in particular, I lead a lot of our data security engagements and efforts within our security work, and a lot of that includes data security for Gen AI and for Copilot. To start off for today, we'll be looking at 3 key data risks associated with Copilot. These 3 data risks are data oversharing, data loss, and data non-compliance. It's important that we keep in mind specifically all 3 of these risks, and individually we'll go over what they are, how we can gain visibility into them, and how we can remediate these risks and move forward as an organization with better security posture. Let's start off with data oversharing risks. So what is data oversharing? Well, by default, Copilot only accesses data that the individual is authorized to access. However, oversharing happens when an employee maybe has access to information that is beyond what is necessary to do their jobs. And what can cause oversharing can be a plethora of things. It can be accidentally saving a file to a location that has very broad access permissions. It can be a user, for example, sharing content with someone who really should not have access to that file or to that data. And it can be files that maybe just by default are organization-wide and just have very wide or broad access protections and doesn't really have any sort of sensitivity blocking. One example of this can be, for example, a site that contains documents with numerous credit card numbers and a lot of sensitive information. If everyone in the organization has access or visibility into this site's content, and we can see, for example, in our interface and in our environment that, 575 users accessed this site in the last week or so, that should bring up a red flag in our minds that we maybe need to handle this sooner rather than later. So we'll want to label that as a very high risk activity, and we'll want to make sure we take care of that as soon as possible. Additionally, when it comes to fixing some of these data oversharing risks, we'll want to specifically restrict user and Copilot access to risky sites while remediating those identified oversharing risks. We'll want to act on policy suggestions, for example, to mitigate oversharing risks and ensure that we don't have an oversharing risk occur in the future. We'll want to prevent Copilot from processing certain sensitive files and from using them in responses if a customer or an employee, for example, requests Copilot to produce a document. We don't want it to show up if it's sensitive. And then we'll want to remove organization-wide site access as needed. That, of course, can be something that's very dangerous, and not everything needs to be organization-wide. Additionally, as we go forward, we'll want to monitor for new oversharing risks. And in particular, we'll want to get notifications and alerts when oversharing occurs with options for remediation. We'll want to further secure our sensitive data through file level access controls. So we'll want to go file by file and sometimes label our files as a particular level of sensitivity and use DLP to perform this labeling so that files don't leak to those who aren't privy to seeing them. And we'll want to improve Copilot responses by archiving or deleting unneeded or stale data that's very old, maybe has sensitive information in it that we really don't need anymore, doesn't need to exist anymore, and we can simply just get rid of it. Moving forward, we'll go over to insider risk. Insider risk or data loss, for example, can occur with or without Copilot use. And the productivity benefits of Copilot creates opportunities for these risks to happen when we don't really expect it and with very little effort. Data loss is particularly when unsafe or inappropriate sharing, transfer, or the use of sensitive content occurs. An insider risk involves users misusing their authorized access to cause harm to the organization. And this misuse may be intentional or not. What causes data loss and insider risk? Well, it can be a combination of things. Copilot, for example, could create a document that isn't protected by default because the inputs you gave to Copilot, for example, may not have had any protections associated with it. So it may not have known. Using Copilot, for example, to access or summarize sensitive data can be a data loss, can be an insider risk in particular. And that could even violate your own guidelines. So it's important to ensure that your guidelines are up to date and aligned with Copilot. A user's credentials could be compromised, and the bad actor or threat actor in this case may use Copilot to access that sensitive data using that user's access. Or an employee may have recently resigned, and this is often when we speak about data exfiltration. An employee might try to pilfer a lot of proprietary information, company IP, and other sensitive documents out of the organization prior to their leaving and prior to them losing access to that as their account is devolved. Here, for example, is our use of sensitive information protection in place in real time. Let's say, for example, we have a document that contains sensitive merger information. Well, we have our auto labeling policy label this as mergers and acquisitions. So when we go to Copilot to create a summary of the new document, Copilot goes, it looks for this document, it realizes, hey, this policy has been labeled as mergers and acquisitions. You can't summarize this. You're not privy to that information. So Copilot basically says, well, talk to the hand. This information is currently protected, and it cannot provide those details to you. That's what we want. Additionally, going forward, a user could perform, for example, a series of risky actions that could trigger alarms. Oftentimes, we have our policies detect for a baseline or a modus operandi across multiple groups or across multiple departments. And if something just looks suspicious or just even triggers a built-in protection, we can get an alert of that action. We can then get a visual view of a sequence of patterns that this user may have taken. And from there, we can automatically add this user to essentially our kind of no-fly list internally and ensure that they have to obey stricter policies. They won't have access to sensitive files. They won't be able to take things out. They won't be able to access certain documents anymore going forward. And last but not least, let's discuss the topic of AI governance. Copilot governance supports Copilot use and adherence to your organization's policies and regulatory requirements. Governance is enforced by a set of compliance and management controls for the safe and effective use of Copilot in alignment with those controls. It includes the option to include Copilot interactions in existing compliance, management, and legal processes alongside your existing M365 content. So if you already have policies for your M365 content, and you're now getting started with Copilot, you do not need to start from scratch. Copilot can simply inherit your already existing restrictions and simply enforce those rules alongside it. So why do you need Copilot governance? Well, you want to configure Copilot admin controls to support compliance with specific frameworks sometimes, depending on what you may be audited against. And different AI regulatory frameworks already exist within Microsoft's ecosystem, within Microsoft purview, so to speak, such as the EU AI Act or the NIST AI risk management framework. Copilot governance will also allow you to limit the exposure from Copilot misuse by identifying issues early and mitigating them quickly, as opposed to waiting for something to get out of hand and having to deal with it later. Increased Copilot response quality is also a side effect of better governance, as your your specific response that you get back from Copilot is automatically going to be in alignment with that governance. And then lastly, you can decide to keep or delete Copilot generated content according to your risk management preferences. Some things may not need to stay for too long. When it comes to Copilot governance, you can audit Copilot interactions to access detailed log information and get better visibility into what people are pulling out of Copilot. You can enforce retention and deletion policies for Copilot interactions and meeting recordings and transcripts. Some meetings and content may be sensitive, and that information maybe shouldn't stick around for too long. Or perhaps you are being audited and you need that information to stick around just for a little bit. You can dictate how that's done. Additionally, you can include a user's Copilot prompts and responses in a legal hold. And last but not least, for governance, you can receive an alert if a possible compliance or ethical violation occurs and start an investigation from there. You can perform an admin search for litigation or an investigation to include Copilot generated content if you believe something's gone wrong with Copilot there. And you can assess and track your adherence against those regulatory frameworks that we mentioned before. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead here, pass it along to Annie from Modern Work, our Modern Work team.
Thank you so much, Naeem, and thanks for that overview really on the risk and threat landscape and security with Copilot. It's such a pivotal and important foundation to lay when we get started with organizations and their Copilot journey. But everyone, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Annie Lee, and I lead our adoption change management team at Valorem Reply's Modern Work side of the house. And I'm going to be chatting a little bit about this little known but ever important component of digital transformation with Copilot, known as adoption change management. What is adoption change management? Well, if you haven't heard of it before, it really lays at the intersection of three key things that we want to consider when rolling out digital tools. And those three things are people, process, and technology. So adoption change management is really here to look after the people side of the change, recognizing that really in order for an organization to exhibit positive change, it needs the individual mindsets and behaviors to change first. So it's really what we can look after in terms of driving adoption at the individual level to make Copilot's impact that much stronger. Why is change management unique for generative AI tools like Copilot? Well, really, Copilot's like nothing employees have ever seen before. And the last couple of years have been extremely innovative, but also disruptive in a good sense. But with Copilot, first and foremost, it's a new technology. Again, not everyone in our workforce overall is used to essentially talking with an AI personal assistant or an AI fellow colleague. And that experience and the idea that Copilot can generate such rapid and vast outputs is new to individuals. Another component that makes Copilot unique is that every user's experience is different. And even within a single user, such as myself, when I interact with Copilot, every prompt that I give is going to give a different style of result. And even running the same Copilot prompt twice doesn't always give the exact same answers or outputs. So the fact that it is such a unique tool and really that its outputs aren't always super consistent, sometimes that can bring a little bit of heartburn for individuals. As we all know, Copilot is always evolving, and while that's fantastic and the functionality continues to grow so much, sometimes it makes it hard for people to feel that they are knowledgeable about each of the functionalities that Copilot brings. And the amount of change that is happening is so rapid that it can be a little bit saturating sometimes. Technical abstraction is also a hurdle when we think about Copilot. And what this really means is that even though we might understand the foundations of a large language model, sometimes we don't understand why Copilot chooses to prioritize maybe one element of our prompt over another, or how it prioritizes really our inbox, for example. We don't always get to see behind the curtain, and again, sometimes this can cause a little bit of confusion. And lastly, we have something called the productivity proof dilemma. I'm sure many of you have had discussions around this. That is really around the notion that if Copilot is allowing me to create better and more outputs from my work, am I conversely going to be given more work? Or how does this really impact my role in the organization? And so these different challenges help really understand more about the user experience when they're being faced with a new tool like Copilot. What this means for organizations is that we've got a couple of new focus areas to think about when it comes to driving Copilot adoption. So, first and foremost, it's all about the message. Many organizations that we work with, we're getting started by laying the foundation of how does the organization feel about AI and how can we communicate broadly as an organization about our stance on AI and really how we envision it being used at the company. Next up, how do I actually prepare employees to use this tool effectively? And with it changing so quickly, how can we ensure that we're staying at the forefront of that innovation and being able to leverage the new capabilities as they arise? And of course, the big one that we all know and love, what's the ROI? And how can we quantify this in order to measure it, report back to leadership, and really see the benefits of the tool? Here at Valorem Reply, we really think about three keys to success when it comes to those questions. And our approach is rooted in the ProSci ADKAR methodology, which is really focusing on awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement through the change journey. To really tackle the awareness and desire components of that framework, we want to focus on building a strong communications and training campaign to bring Copilot to the masses and make sure that they have the skills to be able to use it. Also, creating a space for them to share ideas and really communicate with a community of Copilot users. Within that community, we want to bring out some of the influential and really early adopters of technology to be champions and to establish this network of individuals who can really bring insight and really guidance to the ground level with Copilot. And again, we want to be along the journey, measuring ongoing success, making sure we identify what success means to us early on, and capturing results on that throughout the implementation. With that, let's dive into that first pillar to start. So, creating a communications and training campaign that is effective. From the communication side, again, it's all about managing the message and how we communicate with people to drive that awareness and desire. We want to build excitement. We want to indicate what can happen with Copilot and what are some of the benefits that you can reap. What's in it for you? We then want to start with demonstrating what's valuable and where to get started. But as part of this, we also want to bust some myths. We want to essentially reassure people that Copilot is secure to use, unlike ChatGPT and other AI tools that aren't connected into the Microsoft environment. Copilot ensures that we've got enterprise data protection, which is a huge plus not only for individual users, but for the organization. And we want to set realistic expectations. We don't want people to feel that Copilot's going to do a whole end to end process and do their job for them. Conversely, it's actually about empowering each task and each step that you're looking to take as part of your working process and empowering that even further with AI. On the training front, it's about meeting people where they are. Some people learn best with kind of self service, gently paced training materials, but others really love to have different modalities, such as instructor led training or open office hours where people can come, ask questions, and share ideas. We want to make sure that we're training not just for the tool and the various applications that Copilot can be used in, but also for the role, making it specific to each person and their day to day work. With learning, we also want to make sure that people have a space to come back to, a place to ask questions, such as a community in Viva Engage or Microsoft Teams to be able to lend itself to Q&A, support, troubleshooting, and so forth. And as we go along the way, we want to collect feedback on the training and learning experience so that we can iterate and adjust as needed. When we talk about making Copilot relevant to the role, it's really important to understand who's using Copilot and why they're using it. And we call these Copilot use cases. Really, across professional services, there are such a breadth of use cases that make Copilot really shine and drive value in that everyday processes that people work through. And so it's important for us as we go through the training process to identify those key use cases with organizations and with representatives. And some of those representatives might then become our champions of Copilot. So let's touch upon our next pillar, building a champion network or cohort. Some of you may be familiar with this notion of change champions or a change network. And essentially, they're that group of influential early adopters and essentially advocates of change that are here to really drive and influence adoption at the ground level. They are people who are showing early interest in Copilot, and they want to be working alongside the project team in order to drive that value and in order to support their own team members. Champions are a great way to serve as really an extra arm to the project team, an extension of your project team, acting as the voice of the end user and also facilitating two-way communication. And lastly, let's talk about measuring success. It's really key as part of not only having Copilot licenses and having Copilot in the environment, but also key to ensuring that we're on the right path with adoption. Before we start a rollout, it's important to have a clear vision of what we really define as success. When we think about the quantitative side of success measurement, we're thinking about the number of active users, frequency, how often are people using Copilot and in what applications, the amount of time saved, whether that's self-reported or estimated by Microsoft, whether people feel there's been an improvement in quality of output, and of course, user satisfaction. And we have a couple of tools in our toolkit to help us do this. The first is actually using surveys, interviews, focus groups to be able to actually reach the end users and analyze how they're working with Copilot. We've got the Copilot dashboard and Viva Insights as well with Microsoft. If you've got over 50 Copilot licenses, you've got great access to a lot of data here, helping us to understand, again, the usage levels, where the use cases are being most adopted, and the use of Copilot across different tools. And we can also consider A/B user testing, something really from the UI/UX world, where we're thinking about evaluating those use cases for the audience that is licensed with Copilot versus those that are not, and being able to kind of quantify what is that next level increase in quality, speed, efficiency, and more with Copilot. And so by evaluating these three areas, we get to understand a bit more about how Copilot's being used, the frequency level, and really the sentiment or perception. And these help to inform how we can move forward with Copilot at an organization. To wrap us up, what are we looking at when we're thinking about a successful Copilot rollout? We want to first be thinking about managing how Copilot and AI in general are perceived at the organization and really focusing on that awareness and desire to use the tool. We want to be identifying those key high value use cases and then training people against those use cases so that they know how to help Copilot help them. We then want to build on that change network and ensure everyone really understands the best way to use the tool and how to advocate for it. And we want to create that business case really funneled by that regular and comprehensive view of ROI. That's it from me here today. Again, thanks so much for joining us and hope that you learned a little bit more about Copilot adoption. If you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And with that, I will toss it over to my colleague, Bill Feldker, to talk a little bit more about expanding Copilot with agents. Over to you, Bill.
Hello, my name is Bill Felker. I'm a senior manager on the modern work side, so I work alongside Annie in many projects where we actually help build additional capabilities within Copilot. So today I'm here to talk about extending Copilot with custom agents. So let's go ahead and get started. So when we think about what is Copilot and what we're using it for, we're using it for those standard tools, where we're looking at the Microsoft Cloud, tools such as Word, PowerPoint, Excel, SharePoint, OneDrive in your mailbox. However, most of the information or some of the information that we really need access to is actually outside of the Microsoft Cloud, which Copilot initially can't access. So what if you could leverage those things of data, CRM data, ERP systems, knowledge bases, and embed them into the AI? This integration would elevate the individual user efficiencies and hopefully to organization-wide efficiencies. So when we talk about what Copilot extensibility is, we talk about what it is, that it's a method to, empower Copilot to interact securely with information that's outside of the Microsoft 365 cloud using what we call agents to do it. So in the graph here on the screen, we have, it illustrates Copilot agents. On the Y-axis, we have skills, and then on the X-axis, we have knowledge. The smaller rectangle, which represents Copilot from M365 out of the box, is where we can actually go at first. But then when we actually add agents, we can enhance that Microsoft Copilot by enabling new actions and customized knowledge for grounding within Copilot for Microsoft 365. And then as we look to, what types of agents we can create, there's really two that we talk about: declarative agents and custom engine agents. Declarative agents are Copilot agents where they're built for a very specific business need. They can integrate seamlessly with plugins and Microsoft Graph connectors and provide a secure and consistent user experience with that Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Custom agents, on the other hand, are enterprise conversational agents built on custom foundation models. These agents offer greater flexibility and independence, allowing for highly specialized AI solutions tailored to unique organizational requirements. So now that we've seen those two flavors, how do we know which one to use? So typically what we look for is using those declarative agents when you need a tailored solution within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. It's ideal for scenarios, where you're looking at bringing in specific instructions, APIs, and plugins, thinking of things such as an IT self-service, real-time customer support, or enhancing productivity with domain-specific knowledge. However, when we look at those custom copilots, we need highly specialized AI solutions. These are built using Teams AI Library or Copilot Studio, offering greater flexibility and independence. They're perfect for unique organizational requirements that go beyond the capabilities of just a simple declarative agent. But we also have to choose the right tools based off our expertise. Not every tool is created for every user. So when we think about some of those tools that we can use to build agents, the Teams toolkit is really set up for developers. Copilot Studio is one for people who have no code or low code options, and it makes it really easy to use. But for the pro code users, there's Azure OpenAI and the Teams AI library. So diving a little deeper into something that we called connectors earlier that we brought up, Graph connectors provide a connection to the enterprise knowledge that resides in third-party data sources, whether they're on premises or in the cloud. We can index this information and make it part of that grounding process of Copilot. It allows it to enhance the information and be able to pull it up. It not only does it help Copilot, but it can also enhance Microsoft Search, your Context IQ, or even your Microsoft 365 apps. The best part of all of this is that data is protected by the same security and compliance policies that apply to your existing Microsoft 365 data. And then also taking a closer look at plugins. These are essential for connecting Copilot with third-party applications or external platforms to Microsoft 365, particularly retrieving that real-time business data. Consider, a plugin as an API that enables communication between different platforms. They can also use these rich, customizable adaptive cards to show content back to the users, and so it shows it in a nice visual way. The best part about this is we can reuse the existing investments that you've already made from Microsoft ecosystem, or you can always build new ones if something doesn't already exist. So when we start to talk about navigating that extensibility landscape, we have to go from the least to the most comprehensive or to the end-to-end look at this. We have those no-code solutions, which is basically adopting those connectors or plugins and allowing us to build something very easily, very quickly as we're looking through it. Then we can move forward to that next in the spectrum, which is that low-code solution. Basically here we can introduce Copilot Studio. With Copilot Studio, you can extend Copilot's power. It's basically a playground where you can customize and shape whatever Copilot you need to fit your unique needs. When we need to go to that next level where we have that pro code solution and we need to get that deeper customization, we need to pull in some additional data or look at different large language models to process our data. That's when we need to start looking at a tool like Azure AI Studio, and then we can fine tune that generative AI models for specific use cases. So let's go ahead and start talking about agents and what agents are. So what are agents and how do they work? Agents are basically your AI assistants that can help you optimize your business processes and enhance the productivity of users. Copilot agents can vary in complexity and capabilities depending on what your need is. From the simple to the most advanced. If we think about what the simple context could be, a simple retrieval agent where it retrieves information from grounding data, reasons across that. It can summarize and answer user questions and makes it really simple for users to use. We can move on to the next level, which would be taking actions upon when asked on different things. We can automate workflows, and we can even replace repetitive tasks for users. And then we go to the most advanced type, which is like those autonomous agents. They operate independently, dynamically. They actually plan, orchestrate. They can actually use other agents, or other users can be pulled into those autonomous agents and the scale on them. They can also learn and escalate as needed. There are countless ways to optimize and reinvent your business process with Copilot agents. Whether you want to transform those complex and dynamic processes, reimagine possibilities with like a multi-agent collaboration, or enable every employee to augment their jobs with agents. Copilot agents can handle highly variable situations in real time, using the judgment to plan their next steps and to perform tasks required to complete the job. Agents can also collaborate with other users or agents to accomplish those tasks, and also span disconnected systems or even organizational boundaries. They use natural language, and any employee can be empowered to design and operate custom tailored agents for their workflows. So let's give an example of what an agent for employee self-service might look like. We can pull together different data that might be important, HR, IT, different service providers like Workday, SAP, and ServiceNow, and they can all pull into that as knowledge sources. They can then start answering questions, typical questions that you might have, pulling in that information as needed, but then also build in those workflows where it can actually move out of the typical answering of prompts, but also go into saying, hey, did this not answer your question? Can we create a ticket using our IT systems, for the help desk? So now that we've talked a little bit about agents, I'm going to pass it over to our guest speaker, Scott Keegan from BPN.
Thanks very much, Bill. I appreciate it. So just want to do a real quick intro of myself. I kind of have a unique history. Started off project management in video games, working on World of Warcraft, went to military defense contracting, making soldier system, weapon sites, commercial real estate, and now I'm in the accounting advisory and assurance world. One thing that I've found with all of that experience and tools that I've implemented across my almost 18 years of project management is Copilot is one of the most robust tools that helps evolve how we function as a business that I've put into place. But before I get into how much I love the tool, I want to talk about some of the immediate challenges that we faced when going about putting this tool into place. We started off with about a 50-person pilot, and I did the training myself, developed the materials, so on and so forth. As we started to look at expanding this to more people, that scale of rollout became a true impediment. I'm not able to continually train hundreds of people up to our 1,300-person company. That's not something I had time to do amid the myriad of other initiatives that I had going on. And that's where Reply came in clutch. Partnering with them on the training materials, they presented a really great series of, in this application, we teach you how to use it this way, and it's really beneficial. And we've had, in some of our trainings, up to 540 people attend in a single training, which was fantastic. Adoption rate was another concern because, as my next point is going to be, the cost of Copilot is not insignificant. So we want to make sure that people are using it. They're using it regularly, that they're getting good value and benefit out of it. And that was another area where Reply was very much instrumental in how we did that. Currently, we have all 1,300 of this licensed, and we're at around a 78% adoption rate. So there's still some people that we're looking to try and get into using it in the first place. But overall, it's a pretty successful number because we're at right around 1,000 of our 1,300 people. But again, it's important that we maintain the understanding that this is not a cheap tool. This is one that requires significant buy-in from your leadership, significant buy-in for pretty much everybody to make sure that you're getting the actual ROI that you need on this tool. And what helps support us, in addition to Reply and their training, they're educating us on how to be better partners and giving us good guidelines on how to ensure the adoption rate was high, is one thing that I've noticed for our company was passivity is your enemy. If you're not active about this, you're going to have problems, which means getting the right engagement from the right stakeholders. We had our CEO and COO both talk about it in our town halls, send emails. We had our directors of the different partner groups and different areas of expertise all send emails and please go to these trainings, please be engaged, here's some great user things. And then we worked through each group to define champions, as Annie mentioned earlier, to create new prompts. Because I'm IT, I don't know the business side as well as they do. I can't help them create cool prompts. I can be like, here's how you summarize meetings. It's, while helpful, it's not what they're really looking for, because everybody in those practice groups wants that individual, here's how this will make my job easier beyond just the operational things of meetings and so on. So those champions are extremely helpful in that area. And to quickly touch on what Naeem was talking about is we started with a small group as we were implementing Purview to help us make sure that we had good security controls around this. And we're doing this in a safe way. We're also working on improving our data hygiene, because one thing you're going to come into awareness of, if the data is bad, Copilot's useless. It goes off the data that you have. So you need to have good quality data hygiene. You need to make sure that you have good data in, makes good data out. And then to touch on Bill's part, as far as agents and our development therein, we're still kind of in the early inception of that, but we're trying to build a robust process around that. Right now, we have 7 agents that are live in our company. We have about 6 more in flight. But the important part of that is you need to make sure that you have an appropriate intake for this. It should be separate from your project intake, because those are 2 totally different things. A lot of times agents are quick, fast development, quick turnaround, maybe even same day, assuming that you've done something similar before. So it's important to make sure you have a good intake on this. We have a role at BPM called the Business Relationship Manager. It's basically a business analyst where they go out into the ether, work with business stakeholders, shadow them, literally watch how they do things, and create a list of opportunities for us to be able to proactively improve the lives of people out there through automations, agents, however we're looking to do that. It is very important that you build good guidelines and policies. Touching on many of what everybody else has said, this is one of those things that if you just go with the Wild West and let people do what they want, it can be detrimental, because certain accesses and certain things that creators have and implement, and if they make dashboards or reporting and stuff and all that gets out, it could be challenging for you to kind of claw back that information. Another big thing that was really beneficial for us is build good, easily accessible libraries. Copilot innately has good libraries, but we also built a SharePoint site to make it easy for people to search for various different things, for prompts, for agents, so on and so forth. Having these easily accessible that the champions can also help update as you're going along makes a very big difference. And then the last thing about agents is we want to make sure that we have a good lift and shift framework. We want to build it modular so that we can do agile, quick development products to fire out as many agents as we can. And that's what we're building the framework for now. Everything that we do has good comments, has good information, has good ways to reuse these things so that we can have that product development happen very quickly in an agile methodology. Because as everybody stated, this stuff will change the scope of how you function very, very quickly. And it's important to be able to be on top of that. One last thing I'm going to throw in there. I know I've kind of gone on a little bit. If you haven't played with Copilot Analyst and Researcher, they are, to use a highly technical term, bonkers. Absolutely amazing outputs, very in-depth understanding of different topics with Researcher. Analyst is fantastic at evaluating numerous different documents in great ways. So yeah, just wanted to throw out a little bit of my experience, some of the pitfalls to watch out for, some of the important things to keep in mind if you're looking at implementing this. But I will say it has been incredibly revolutionary for our efficiency, for our revenue generation, for any number of areas where it's been utterly amazing. So I'm going to hand it back to Andrew. Thank you all for joining and listening to my ramblings.
Thank you, Scott. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with BPM and yourself on kind of leading the spear on professional services inside of the industry. So thank you for your insight on that. we've got a couple more minutes, and I want to make sure to give some time for Q&A. Thank you for those who have submitted in the chat already. So where do you get started? And does it always have to start from the beginning? And really, no, right? Every professional services is going to be somewhere in between in here. They might have stronger governance and data positions. They may have a bottom up where the people are really excited about it, but they're not sure on how to do it at the top level and make sure that their company is protected. And all of this to say is we've got a framework that will meet you where you are at, right? And some of those questions is, I want to do this customized thing. I think someone in the Q&A was talking about DLP, and we can come in the customized consulting services and kind of just what we did today is get in your organization, figure out what you're worried about, but it should not be a blocker to getting into AI and copilots. AI and copilots is not going away. It is something that will be forever cemented into our daily lives going forward. And so being able to accept that as an industry and then go and say, hey, okay, what am I comfortable with on where I'm going to use this? Because as we all know, the constant battle between IT and users is your users are going to find a way to use it. And so what better way to do that is to lead that initiative and go along with them, kind of like what Scott was saying in BPM is from the top to the bottom, everyone's engaged and ready and willing to adopt this. Couple more slides. More importantly, our successes spans across all different professional services. So AI is just not fit for one kind of particular industry or area. It can accommodate any type of company, no matter where you're at, like I was explaining before. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Appreciate all your guys' time. And if there's any questions, feel free to come off mute or enter them in the chat, and we can discuss for a little bit. And just to cover inside of the chat, Russell submitted a question about when I create Copilot agents. I often found that when chatting with Copilot about Studio, Copilot's information about creating and managing agents is a little outdated. This is a tough one, right? And we have some answers inside of here. Thank you, Annie, and Daniel for responding. But AI is a tough thing, right? It is ever moving, constantly evolving. So some of those, sometimes I've had experience, and I know inside of here, Russell, you put in the official documentation, but sometimes I've put in white papers inside of Copilot and asked them to summarize and answer and use official, more updated documents, and then use Copilot to go through those documents as well, as this is ever unstable and ever changing. So using that in the training, I just use Copilot in different ways, not just always asking questions. Sometimes giving it information to work off of is beneficial. And then Curtis asked that question about data loss prevention and DLP. Like I said, when we engage with clients in any particular area, if you don't want to enable something, we can work through those scenarios and figure out a custom tailored plan that fits you where you're at, and then expand from that, right? There is nothing that should be an ultimate blocker besides your organization just does not want to use Copilot. There is a solution to build around certain areas that you may want to enable or disable in Purview, and may just be more of a licensing conversation to get more of those features on what to turn on, turn off, restrict, or enable. With that, we're at time. I appreciate everybody joining the call. Thank you very much. And I'll just add moving forward. We do have additional live events and webinars coming up. Here's a QR code if you want to scan that before hopping off. And our Valorem website will also have all of these events listed. So please, we are active in this community and passionate about promoting AI and how to use that in the industry. So please join us for future events, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you all so much. And thank you again, Scott, for joining us from BPM as well. We hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you all. Have a great day.